All right, get ready to dive deep today because we're tackling a topic that just might change how you approach, well, pretty much everything.
Oh, setting the bar high today, I see.
Hey, that's what we do here. We're going to be talking about how design thinking, that problem-solving thing you usually think of with like what tech products, apps, that sort of thing,
Yeah, I got.
can actually be used to craft a more fulfilling life, like literally design your life.
That's the idea we're diving into.
And all this comes from a piece called Resumen, right?
The one. And it argues that this whole innovative process we see behind so many amazing products, the stuff we use every day, that same process can be used to help us achieve our own personal goals and tackle those big, messy life challenges we all face.
Okay, I gotta admit, the idea of like prototyping my life choices, it sounds kind of cool,
Right.
but also kind of scary. Like, where do we even start with applying this to, being a human and living in the real world?
Well, Resumen breaks it down into those familiar design thinking stages.
Yeah.
Empathy, problem definition, ideation, prototyping, and testing. You've probably heard of those before.
Yeah, for sure. But wait, instead of designing, say, an app, it's like I'm the one being designed.
Exactly. You are at the center of this design process.
So then empathy in this context wouldn't be about understanding a target user or customer. It would be about understanding myself.
You got it. Starts with deep self-reflection. Understanding your values, what you desire, what you truly need, what motivates you, what brings you joy, and also what are your non-negotiables. Resumen really stresses that this foundation, this understanding of yourself, it's crucial before you even start trying to define a problem you're facing.
Okay, I'm following so far. So let's say I'm feeling stuck, like in my career. And I don't mean just like, oh, Monday morning stuck, but like deep down, is this all there is stuck?
Yep.
Would that be a good place to start applying this whole process?
Absolutely. In fact, Resumen really highlights how design thinking shines when dealing with what they call wicked problems. These are those complex situations where there are no simple answers. Like the career rut you're talking about, it probably goes way deeper than meeting a new job title. Right.
Right. Okay, so let's say I'm feeling stuck. I've done some soul searching, figured out my values and needs. What's next? Do I need to like further define this wicked problem?
Yes. The next stage is all about defining that problem. It's about moving past just feeling vaguely dissatisfied. You've got to pinpoint those specific pain points.
So instead of just saying, I hate my job, I'd have to figure out what exactly about it doesn't line up with, those values we talked about.
Precisely. Is it the actual work you're doing? Is it the company's culture? Maybe there's a lack of opportunity for growth. Whatever it is, getting specific, getting granular, that's key.
I see. So it's like taking this big, overwhelming feeling of being stuck and breaking it down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
And once you have those pieces laid out, that's when the real fun begins, ideation.
Ooh, brainstorming time. That's something I can get behind. But how does that apply to, like, a career crisis? We're not coming up with a new flavor of potato chips here.
It's still about generating a wide range of solutions. Don't be afraid to go a little crazy at first.
Out-of-the-box thinking, right?
Exactly. Resumen emphasizes pushing past those limits we often set for ourselves. Maybe the solution is going back to school or taking night classes to explore something totally different. Maybe it's finally launching that side hustle you've always dreamed about.
I like where this is going.
It could even be a combination of things, something you hadn't even considered before. The point is, don't get stuck overthinking it.
So action over analysis paralysis. That means I'd be actually testing out these different possibilities.
Now you're getting it, and that's where prototyping comes in. This stage is all about experimenting, but in a way that's low risk.
Okay, so in my career scenario, my prototype wouldn't be like dramatically quitting my job and crossing my fingers.
Nope. It might be shadowing someone who's already doing what you think you might want to do, even just for a day. Or maybe taking on a volunteer project that uses those skills you want to develop.
Mm-hmm.
You could even just start with informational interviews. Talk to people who are doing what you find interesting. Resumen points out that these smaller experiments can give you really valuable insights and help you zero in on the right direction.
So it sounds like this design thinking thing, it's not just about the steps, it's about a mindset shift too, right? Like instead of getting caught up in trying to find the perfect solution right away, it's about going through this process, testing things out, learning as you go, and being okay with adapting.
You're catching on quick.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really interesting, because Resumen doesn't just lay out these practical steps. It also digs into the psychology behind why this approach can be so effective for personal growth.
Oh, that's what I was hoping we'd get to. So what kind of psychology are we talking about?
Well, for one, this whole idea of going through this process, this iterative design, It lines up perfectly with something called a growth mindset.
I've heard of that. Remind me what that is again.
Basically, it's the belief that challenges aren't failures, but opportunities to learn and grow.
So instead of feeling defeated because I'm stuck in my career, I could look at it as a chance to learn more about myself and maybe discover some new possibilities. That's definitely a more positive way to look at it.
Right. And there's more. Resumen also connects design thinking to the idea of flow.
Now, that's a word I like, but for the sake of our listeners, remind me again what that means.
It's that feeling you get when you're so absorbed in something, you kind of lose track of time, you're in the zone.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And it's not just about feeling good, it's also linked to being more productive and more creative.
So how does design thinking help us get to that flow state? Is it just that by trying new things, like through prototyping, we're more likely to find activities that we actually enjoy?
It's a little more than that. Think about it. Part of what makes flow happen is having clear goals and feeling like you're making progress. And the design thinking process gives you that. You define the problem, break it down into small steps, and then you're constantly moving forward, experimenting and improving. That creates a sense of accomplishment.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's not just about stumbling upon something you love. It's about having a framework, a process that helps you pursue it in a way that leads to flow.
Exactly.
I remember you mentioned another psychological theory too, something about self-determination.
Right. Resumen links design thinking with self-determination theory, which says that we all have these three basic needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When those needs are met, we tend to be more motivated, more engaged, and ultimately happier.
Okay, so fill me in. How does designing my life, so to speak, help me fulfill those needs?
Let's go back to that career rut example.
Yeah.
You're using design thinking to work through it. So you're defining the problem, coming up with solutions, choosing which prototypes to try out. You're taking control of the process, right?
Right.
That's autonomy right there.
And as I go through that process, I'm learning new things, gaining skills and confidence. That would be the competence part.
You got it. And, maybe while you're doing all this, you end up meeting people who have similar goals or interests, maybe at those informational interviews. That gives you that sense of connection, of relatedness.
Wow, it's amazing how all these pieces fit together. It's not just about solving problems, it's about engaging in a process that's good for our mental well-being and helps us create a life that's both fulfilling and meaningful.
Now that is an insight worth exploring further, and luckily Resumen has a lot more to say about it.
Well, then let's keep going. We'll be back after a quick break to dive even deeper into those connections between design thinking and living a good life.
I'm ready when you are.
Sounds like a plan. See y'all in a bit.
Right back at you.
Welcome back, everyone. We're right in the middle of this awesome deep dive into resumen and how design thinking can be used to, well, design our lives. Before the break, we were really getting into how this whole thing ties into some pretty big psychological theories.
Yeah, and that connection to psychology, I think that's what makes design thinking more than just a way to solve problems. It's a framework, a way to grow as a person.
Resumen really gets into the research behind it all, and it's fascinating stuff. One thing that stood out to me was how this process can help us get into that flow state.
Oh yeah, flow. It's a powerful thing.
Remind us again what that feeling is.
It's that feeling of being completely absorbed in what you're doing. Time just seems to disappear and you're totally in the zone.
Oh, for sure. I've been there.
And the studies have shown it's not just about feeling good. Being in flow actually makes you more productive, more creative.
So how does design thinking help us get into that flow more often? Is it just that by trying new things, like with the prototyping stage, we're more likely to find stuff we love doing?
It's a little more than just finding things you love. Think about it. A big part of flow is having those clear goals and feeling like you're making progress towards them. And that's what design thinking gives you. You define the problem, break it down, and then you're always moving, always experimenting, always getting better.
Yeah.
That sense of accomplishment, that's key.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about stumbling upon something you enjoy. It's about having a system to help you pursue it in a way that, gets you into flow.
Now you're seeing the bigger picture.
You also mentioned another psychological theory earlier, something about self-determination.
Oh yeah, that's another big one.
Oh, yeah.
Resumen ties design thinking to self-determination theory, which says that we all have three core needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And when those needs are met, we're more motivated, more engaged, just generally happier.
Okay, remind me, how does designing my life, so to speak, help with all that?
Picture this. You're using design thinking to deal with that career rut we talked about. You're defining the problem, brainstorming solutions, choosing which prototypes to test. You're calling the shots, right? That's autonomy right there.
Right. And as I go through the process, I'm learning, gaining skills, building confidence. So that would be the competence piece.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe through those informational interviews or networking events, you meet some awesome people, folks with similar goals who really get where you're coming from. That's relatedness in action.
Wow, it's crazy how it all comes together. It's not just about finding answers to problems, it's about being part of a process that makes us feel good, helps us create a life that's both fulfilling and has meaning.
And that brings us right back to those wicked problems we keep talking about. Remember, those are the ones that seem huge, overwhelming, the ones that keep you up at night. Reziman argues that design thinking is especially good at tackling these monsters.
So it's not just for stuff like figuring out what color to paint your living room or where to go on vacation.
Those are important decisions, don't get me wrong. But let's say you're facing something big, like should I move to a new city? Should I change careers? What about a long-term relationship? Should I stay or go? These choices, they can feel paralyzing.
And in those situations, it's tempting to just avoid making a decision at all, right? We get stuck in overthinking mode, hoping the problem will just magically fix itself.
And that's where design thinking says, nope, let's do this differently. Instead of running away from the problem, it encourages you to dive in, break it down,
Yeah.
and experiment your way to a solution.
Okay, so instead of getting overwhelmed by the giant question of should I stay or should I go, I could focus on smaller parts of the situation. Like, what are the pros and cons? What are my deal breakers? What little experiments can I try to get more information?
That's it. It's about taking action, even if it's something small at first, just something to get you going. And remember, every experiment you do, you're gathering information that can help you with your next decision.
It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Only in this case, it's more like a journey of 1,000 experiments.
I like that. And speaking of experiments, Reziman suggests a pretty interesting way to figure out if design thinking actually works for personal growth.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering about that. How do you measure something like personal growth? It can't just be based on, like, happy stories, right?
They propose a method that combines both stories, what they call qualitative data, and numbers, the quantitative data.
So they're actually trying to find out if design thinking makes a real difference in people's lives using numbers and data.
They are. On the qualitative side, they recommend talking to people, in-depth interviews with folks who've used design thinking to work through personal challenges. And they suggest looking at documented success stories to see how the process helped people reach their goals.
Those personal stories, those are always inspiring. But what about the numbers, the hard data? How do you measure something like personal growth?
Now that's where it gets really cool. They propose using surveys, standard ones, to measure things like life satisfaction, overall well-being, and even something called psychological flexibility.
Psychological flexibility, that's a new one for me. What does that even mean?
It's basically the ability to roll with the punches, to
Yeah.
adapt to change, to be open to new things, and to keep going even when things get tough. It's a measure of resilience and how adaptable you are.
I can definitely see how those qualities would be super helpful when you're facing those wicked problems we talked about. So what did they find? Did design thinking actually lead to improvements in these areas?
Reziman admits that there needs to be more research, really rigorous stuff. But the early results, pretty promising. People who used design thinking, they reported higher levels of life satisfaction, they felt more confident about making decisions, and they showed more of that psychological flexibility when things got tough.
Wow, that's great to hear. It really sounds like design thinking could be a powerful tool for personal growth. But let's be honest, no method is perfect. Does Reziman mention any downsides or limitations?
They do acknowledge that it's not some magical cure-all. For design thinking to work, you got to be willing to put in the effort, to really engage in the process, to embrace that growth mindset we talked about.
So you can't just go through the motions and expect amazing things to happen. You got to be an active participant, willing to experiment, learn, and adapt as you go.
You got it. They also point out that while design thinking can tackle concrete problems really well, it might not be the best way to deal with deep emotional issues or past trauma.
That's a really important point. If someone's dealing with serious mental health challenges, they should definitely seek professional help from a therapist or counselor.
Agreed. Design thinking is great, but it's not a substitute for therapy or professional guidance.
Right, it's about using the right tool for the situation. So we've covered a lot of ground. The basics of design thinking, how it connects to psychology, and how it can be used to tackle those tough life challenges. What else does Resumen have for us?
There's one more exciting thing to explore, using design thinking in education. Imagine giving kids these skills, this problem solving and resilience from a young age.
Now, that's a powerful idea. It's like Resumen is saying we need to rethink how we do education, move away from memorizing facts and figures and toward a way of learning that's more hands-on, creative, and focused on solutions.
Exactly. It's time to shift the focus from just knowing things to actually being able to do things. We're talking about creativity, collaboration, critical thinking. Those are the skills that matter.
I can just picture a classroom where kids are encouraged to be innovators, to think outside the box, and to see challenges as opportunities to learn and grow. So different from the traditional classroom setup with rows of desks and memorization drills. That's what a lot of us grew up with.
And you know what's great about it? These skills apply to everyone. Whether a kid wants to be an entrepreneur, an artist, a scientist, or even a social worker, being able to think creatively, solve problems, and adapt to change, that's going to help them no matter what path they choose.
So how does Resumen suggest we make such a big change in education? Are we talking about replacing traditional subjects with design thinking classes?
Not necessarily. The idea is to integrate design thinking into what's already being taught across different subjects. Imagine a history class, for example, where students use design thinking to come up with solutions to a historical conflict. Or in science, where they use it to design experiments to test a hypothesis.
Wow, that's brilliant. It's a way to make learning more engaging and relevant to kids' lives. Instead of memorizing dates and formulas, they're using their knowledge to tackle real-world situations.
And as they do this, they're not just learning to think critically, they're also building those important psychological strengths we talked about. Resilience, a growth mindset, and that ability to be comfortable with things being uncertain.
Those are the exact qualities that'll help them thrive in a world that's constantly changing, right? It's almost like Resumen is saying that teaching design thinking is less about giving kids specific knowledge and more about teaching them how to be, how to approach life with curiosity, creativity, and that desire to make things better.
And that brings us right back to what this whole deep dive has been about.
Hmm.
Recognizing that we have the power to shape our own lives, to design experiences that match our values, and to face challenges with a focus on finding solutions.
It's a powerful message. And all the research that Resumen presents, it really shows that embracing a design thinking approach can make us happier, more resilient, and give us a deeper sense of purpose.
Of course, no single approach is a magic solution for everything. But what's exciting about design thinking is that it gives us this practical framework, a set of tools we can adapt and use in so many situations. Whether it's navigating a career change, building strong relationships, or reaching our personal goals.
As we wrap up this exploration of Resumen, I'm feeling really optimistic and hopeful. It's so inspiring to realize that we can all be designers, we can take control of our own lives, and we can create something truly meaningful.
And remember, this isn't the end of the journey. The real magic happens when we take these ideas and apply them to our own lives. So think about it. What problem or goal are you going to tackle? What experiments can you design? How can you use this process of testing, learning, and adapting to get closer to where you want to be?
Designing your life isn't about finding the perfect answer right away. It's about embracing the process, being open to possibilities, and knowing that each step you take, it's moving you toward a life that's truly your own.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and feel empowered to design the life you want.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep designing. And we're back, ready for the final part of our deep dive into Resumen and this whole idea of using design thinking to design our lives.
Let's do it.
We've covered a lot of ground already, from those practical steps you can take to how it connects with psychology and how it can help us tackle those really tough life challenges.
Those wicked problems, right?
Exactly. But Resumen doesn't stop there. It goes a step further and asks, what if we could teach these skills to young people, like from the very beginning?
It's a game changer. The source really makes the argument that if we integrate design thinking into education, it would be huge. It could help kids develop these essential life skills that, honestly, a lot of traditional school stuff just skips over.
Yeah, it's like we spend so much time cramming kids' heads full of facts and figures, but we forget to teach them how to actually deal with real life, with all its ups and downs, the unexpected challenges and opportunities.
It's true. We give them the knowledge, the math, the science, the history.
Yeah.
But what about those tools they need to solve problems, make decisions, and bounce back when when things don't go their way.
And that's where design thinking comes in. Instead of just sitting there and absorbing information, kids would be actively involved, finding problems, coming up with solutions, building things, testing them out, and learning from their mistakes.
Exactly. It's a shift from learning just the facts to actually learning how to do stuff,
Yeah.
to be creative, to work together, to think critically.
I can just imagine what that kind of classroom would be like. Kids would be encouraged to be innovators, to think outside the box, and see challenges as opportunities for growth. So different from rows of desks and memorizing stuff, which, let's be honest, is what a lot of us grew up with.
And the best part, these skills, they're useful no matter what you do in life. Whether a kid wants to be an entrepreneur, an artist, a scientist, whatever, being able to think creatively, solve problems, and adapt to change those, the skills that will always be valuable.
Absolutely. So how does Reziman suggest we make such a big change in education? Are we talking about getting rid of traditional subjects and replacing them with design thinking courses?
Not exactly. It's more about weaving design thinking into what's already being taught across all sorts of subjects. Like, imagine a history class where students use design thinking to come up with solutions to a historical conflict. Or in science class, where they use it to design experiments and test their theories.
That would make learning so much more engaging and relatable for kids. Instead of just memorizing dates and formulas, they're actually putting their knowledge to work in real-world situations.
And while they're doing all this, they're not just learning how to think critically, they're also building those important psychological strengths we talked about. Resilience, a growth mindset, and that ability to handle uncertainty and ambiguity.
And those are the exact qualities that will help them succeed in a world that's constantly changing and throwing new challenges their way. It's like Reziman is suggesting that teaching design thinking is less about giving kids specific knowledge and more about teaching them a way of being, how
Mhm.
to approach life with curiosity, creativity, and wanting to make things better.
You nailed it. And that brings us back to the core of what this whole deep dive has been about. Realizing that we're not just stuck with whatever life throws our way. We have the power to create our own lives, design experiences that match our values, and face challenges with a solution-oriented mindset.
It's a really powerful message. And all the research Reziman presents, it shows that using a design thinking approach can lead to more happiness, more resilience, and a stronger sense of purpose.
Of course, no one approach is perfect for everything. But design thinking is exciting because it gives us a practical framework, tools we can use in all kinds of situations, from figuring out our careers to building strong relationships to reaching those personal goals we all have.
As we wrap up this exploration of Reziman, I'm left feeling really optimistic and hopeful. It's amazing to think that we can all be designers. We can take charge of our own lives and create something truly meaningful.
And this isn't where the journey ends. It's really about taking these ideas and putting them into practice in our own lives. So what are you going to tackle? What experiments can you design? How can you embrace this whole process of testing things out, learning as you go, and adjusting your approach along the way?
That's a great question to ponder. And remember, designing your life isn't about finding the perfect solution right away. It's about enjoying the journey, being open to new possibilities, and knowing that with each step, you're moving closer to the life you truly want.
Well said. Thanks for being part of this deep dive. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and feel ready to design the life you want.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep designing.